Hello viewers and welcome. We're at Ignite 2017 in the Gold Coast. My name is Travis Sansome and I work for Microsoft, and I've got two other gentlemen who work for Microsoft as well. Casey and Matt, do you want to introduce yourselves?
Sure. My name is Karst. I'm a program manager on SQL DW, and I focus on the polybase space.
And I'm Matt Usher. I'm a PM in the SQL DW team as well, and I've just kind of worked in SQL DW since day one.
Brilliant. I was say, why don't we start off with what is SQL DW, just in case there are some viewers who haven't heard of it before.
Sure. So SQL DW is a scale-out relational data warehouse. It's an Azure service that you can go light up. And it really targets those large data warehouse workloads from half a terabyte to 1 petabyte plus.
Brilliant, brilliant. And I would say, Casey, you mentioned something called polybase as well. Useful to clarify that, I reckon, for the viewers.
Yeah, absolutely. So polybase is a feature that's actually deployed in several of the SQL products that we actually have. So it's in EPS, SQL Server 2016 has a version of polybase, and SQL DW has a version of polybase.
Nice.
And so it's really a connector to data outside of the database. And so in SQL DW, you can actually use it as a loading tool. It's actually the fastest way to get data into SQL Data Warehouse today. And you can directly connect to Azure Data Lake Store or Windows Azure Storage Blob with a concept called an external table. So you just create a table within your SQL Data Warehouse, and you can start referencing it and doing CTASs over that to load the data or query the data.
Awesome. I think we'll get a bit deeper into that
Perfect.
a bit later. Obviously, there's Azure SQL Database, which is our platform as a service database, and then there's Azure SQL DW. And I think, Matt, you briefly touched on the difference between the two, but did you want to touch a bit further on it?
Sure, yeah. So SQL Database is a transactional system. It's really for things that you would run very high number of concurrent queries into that are very low latency. So things like order insertion, so backing a website, for example. Data Warehouse is the opposite of that. It's a very high latency kind of query, low concurrency system where it's taking very large data sets and providing insight and analytics. And so you can think of them as kind of two different views of data. One is this very hot data that's rapidly changing, and one of it is things that you want to then go start to build analytics, trends, reports, insight out of. So really targeting different kind of markets of what you do with data.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. And I was going to say then, in terms of the, management tools, how you actually interface with SQL DW, it's just like SQL Server, right?
Yeah, it's exactly it. Yeah. So it's SQL DW is actually just a set of SQL Server instances running, just like SQL DB, but run in a parallel fashion. So there's a coordination component that runs it all in parallel, and this is what gives it its massive scale.
Yeah.
But it represents itself as SQL Server. It's all the tooling works, all of the ecosystem works, it just connects. The language surface is the same. As Casey mentioned, we use T-SQL, so you can represent a table as a table. Select star from table works in SQL Server and SQL DW.
That's perfect. So for all those DBAs out there, it's right in their backyard, and in fact, everyone else as well.
Yep.
Exactly. Yeah.
I was going to say then, in terms of, although the tools are the same, and I guess even the data loading tools are exactly the same in terms of how I get my data in there are obviously some best practices of how we get data into Azure SQL DW. Casey, do you want to touch on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So to get data into SQL DW, you generally land it in a data lake, or as I said before, Windows Azure Storage Blob before you load the data. And so what we see most often, and the best practice that we see customers actually enable, is you do some sort of cleansing process on that raw data when it lands, because this is generally, we're talking big data here, so it's generally sensor data or something like that, where you need to go through and do a quick pass of it, break down the JSON if it comes in JSON or XML if it's a nested structure, break it down into a flat tabular model, and then do a set of data cleansing. Some folks use ADLA for this, or potentially HD Insights.
Yes.
And then you produce this finalized data set that you put in your production production directory within ADLS or WASB. And then you can use polybase to load that. And so some best practices around polybase is you scale up when you need to do a load, so you can have more computation resources. I don't know if we talked about scale up yet.
We didn't, no.
But with SQL DW, you can actually scale up or down the computation resources on the fly. And so we can go, we sell in data warehouse units, and so the smallest that we sell is a DWU 100, and the largest is DWU 6000. So there's quite a bit of leeway there of, how much performance do you need, and you can finely tune it, and you can go per hour, what performance do I need?
Yes.
So if you're going to do a large data load, it's better to scale up and then load chunks of data at a time.
Yeah.
So I think that's...
Okay, and I was going to say then, In terms of that scale up and scale down, it's a unique feature, right, to the market in terms of data warehousing.
Yeah, it's one of the unique things about SQL Data Warehouse, and we started with this premise when we started the product of, what is the cloud about? And we think about, running a data center on your own premise, and the problem with data centers on your own premise is if you need to add scale, it usually involves a conversation with IT and purchasing, and then a hardware vendor, and then you've got rack and stack and lights and deployments, and this could take weeks, months. I mean, just to simply add capacity. When you think of the cloud, the premise of the cloud is all of that's gone, and there's this burstable compute model. And so with SQL DW, we separated the storage from compute, as Casey mentioned, and you can add each one independently. So as you add data, the data can grow without having to add compute. Maybe if you have a hot-cold system where you're only interacting with some of the data some of the time, you don't need all of that compute at all the time. So you don't have to buy a big giant system if you don't need it from a compute perspective. Or the opposite. We have customers that load smaller sets of data but need massive amounts of compute so they can process through it very, very rapidly. And so you can scale the system based on your need. And as Casey mentioned, dynamically change that based on the workload, not on a month scale or a quarter scale, but actually on an hourly basis right now is how we charge. So if you need compute now, you can go scale the system up.
And that's perfect. I would say with all unique features, though, I guess that introduces some, best practice architectures that people can follow. Can you guys talk through maybe some of the large customers, maybe smaller customers as well, what you're seeing, how they use the service?
Sure, yeah. We have a couple customers. There's a couple good kind of references that we use. One is Lambda architecture, which is a hot-cold path of data. So very kind of in this new world of like IoT devices emitting a lot of data, you'll have this hot path where you want to see what's going on right this second. And so you get kind of on-demand trending. How many people are hitting my website? You want to see the kind of the reaction of your website, and so you can see that kind of as a hot path. And then you want to land that data in something like SQL Data Warehouse for further analysis. Is there seasonality to the trend? Is it every Monday my site gets hit very heavily and I can look at Mondays over a period of a year? Or is it every certain kind of part of the year? Maybe I happen to be in selling beach towels, and so when the summertime hits, all of a sudden I get this spike in traffic. And so you can kind of look at both of those paths. So a Lambda architecture is really kind of useful for ingesting data via something like Stream Analytics and landing that in SQL DW, so you can get both that hot and cold view. The second we see in large enterprises. So when we get to kind of some of the tier one, truly very large enterprise data warehouses, what we see is a combination of things. Customers will land data in things like Hadoop with HDInsight, they'll land it in SQL DW, some combination of the two, as Casey mentioned, kind of staging the data in, say, a data lake or a HDInsight system, and then ingesting that into SQL DW for further analysis. And then with SQL DW, a lot of times we'll see for very high concurrent loads where maybe you're serving a dashboard to 100,000 people. The system is not set up for that kind of concurrency. Instead, it's for really processing, petabytes of data. So what we use is a layer technique of using the Azure analysis services in front of that. It's a tabular-based OLAP system, and so that and SQL DW are paired very well together. And using the raw compute power that you can get from SQL DW, and then layer with analysis service, which gives you additional security features, things like row-level security and that, which you're familiar with from a SQL perspective, and that high concurrency allow you to run thousands of dashboard requests in a second against this very large data set, and all doing that very rapidly.
And I was talking to you earlier, and you were saying how large customers tend to have multiple analysis service cubes hitting the one SQL DW as well.
And that's a common practice. And some of the reasons are they'll do it for geo-redundancy. So they'll have, maybe have a primary site in the US, maybe they'll have a primary site in Australia or, in Europe, and they can kind of have each one of their customers kind of hit the data that's regionally aware. Maybe there's differences either by law or by just governance of the business. And so you can separate it that way. But you can have your central data warehouse wherever you need it and have all of those resources pull from.
Brilliant.
And there's one point also there that we haven't quite talked about is ability to pause. So as soon as, so one of the differentiating things about SQL Data Warehouse is you can pause and resume the compute side of it as well as scale. So you could imagine large enterprise customers when they do all the data crunching that they need to do and they move the data to the analysis services cubes, you can actually pause the SQL DW so you're no longer paying for that computation.
And just turn off the compute completely.
You just turn it off, and the data's still stored, so all you have to do is resume the resource again and you're off to the races. But you can really optimize your spend there pretty effectively.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, well I was going to say if you had, we've got to finish off here, so it's been a pleasure talking, but I was going to say if you had one last line to tell the viewers coming all the way from the US and for SQL DW, what would you tell them? The one from both of you, I reckon, that's what I'll do.
One last line about SQL DW. Probably the biggest thing I hear from people as I talk to them is, how do I get started? How easy is this? How expensive is it? It's a very easy service. This is a PaaS service running in the Azure cloud. You can go into the Azure portal and light one of these up in about 3 to 5 minutes. It takes just a few minutes to get up and get started. And really, customers tend to think of, well, do I have enough data? Is it really, this sounds like one of those big things that I must spend millions of dollars on. And really, it's not a service like that. The intent of the service is you can start where you need to start from your business, and it can grow with you. And to Casey's point, you can scale the compute, you can scale the storage as your business grows. As you put more resources and data into it, then your business or the service can grow with your business to make sure that you don't have to worry about, oh, next month I've got to start thinking about hardware procurements. It's really truly a cloud service that grows with you.
Brilliant. And I would say with that impressive one
That's
line,
a tough
Casey,
one.
you've got to follow that.
I won't take another tack. So you covered the getting started.
Yeah.
If you have any questions about it, if you're concerned, if you just have a question of what's the best practice, we actively listen to the MSDN forums and Stack Overflow.
Perfect.
Try to reply within 24 hours. We have alert systems coming to us personally via email. So if you're running into any issues, just reach out to the world and we'll be there to respond, or the community will be there to respond. So don't feel like you're going alone.
Yeah, going alone. Okay, with that, we'll wrap it up. I'd like to say thank you to all the viewers for watching this. This has been Ignite 2017 in the Gold Coast, data analytics track with some fantastic guys on Azure SQL DW, direct from the product team. We look forward to you viewing some more videos, and we'll see you in the future. Bye.